It's not every day that a former royal decides she's had enough of the crown and the country that came with it. But for Sarah Ferguson, the Duchess who once lit up palace halls with laughter and rebellion, the fairy tale has turned into something far darker. Once adored by millions, she's now cornered by scandal, shut out from royal life, and, according to insiders, planning her biggest move yet, a secret escape from the United Kingdom itself. After decades of luxury, royal privilege, and public attention, everything is slipping away: the title, the home, and even her peace of mind. Reports say she's been leaning on her sister for support, while whispers suggest she's desperate to leave the chaos behind for good. But here's the twist: the place she's rumored to flee to might just be the one thing standing in her way, because escaping the UK could cost her far more than her reputation. It could cost her everything that's left of her royal identity. And that's where this story takes a turn no one saw coming. Before we uncover her secret plan and the one major drawback that could destroy it, make sure you hit subscribe, because what's happening behind royal walls right now is unlike anything we've seen before.
Sarah Ferguson's story was never ordinary. From the moment she stepped into the royal spotlight in the mid-1980s, she was seen as the spark the family needed: warm, funny, unpredictable, and completely different from the rigid expectations of palace life. The public adored her. The press couldn't get enough of her charm. For a while, she was the refreshing breeze that made the monarchy feel human again. But behind the laughter and red hair was someone who never truly fit the mold. And the royal world, with all its rules and quiet judgments, doesn't forgive easily. The first cracks started showing early. Her marriage to Prince Andrew, once a fairy tale headline, began to crumble under the weight of royal duties, endless gossip, and long separations. By the early 90s, the tabloids had turned on her, publishing scandalous photos, financial rumors, and humiliating stories that followed her for years. Then came the infamous toe-sucking scandal, the cash for access sting, and a string of failed business ventures. Each time, Fergie would promise to rebuild, and each time the shadow of controversy grew darker. But the most damaging blow came years later, not from her own mistakes, but from the company she kept. Her continued closeness to Prince Andrew, especially after his connection to Jeffrey Epstein, reignited every old headline and opened fresh wounds in her reputation. Even as she tried to maintain her charitable work and media career, the backlash was merciless. Overnight, organizations began distancing themselves. Longtime supporters went quiet, and within the palace, doors that had once opened for her were closing. For a woman who had fought her way back into royal favor more than once, this time felt different. The silence from the establishment spoke volumes. And just when it seemed she might weather another storm, the pressure became too much. Rumors began swirling that she was at a breaking point, and that this time she wasn't planning another comeback, but an escape. Because for Sarah Ferguson, it wasn't just her reputation that was collapsing, it was her entire world. For decades, Sarah Ferguson had learned how to smile through the chaos. No matter what the headlines said, no matter how many times she was dragged through the tabloids, she always managed to bounce back, cheerful, defiant, and somehow still standing. But this time, something changed. As the controversies piled up again, the resurfaced Epstein connection, the charities quietly cutting ties, the cold distance from Buckingham Palace, it wasn't just another PR crisis. It felt like the end of the road. According to royal insiders, Sarah became increasingly isolated at Royal Lodge, the lavish home she once shared with Prince Andrew. Friends say she'd stopped attending most public events, avoiding the press, and retreating from the life she used to command with ease. Behind closed doors, the tension was rising. There were whispers of sleepless nights, emotional outbursts, and calls for help that only a sister could answer. That's when Jane, her older sister, reportedly flew in from Australia, not just for a visit, but out of concern. The two were said to spend hours talking in private, away from the cameras, away from the scrutiny. And while no one knows exactly what was said, one thing seemed clear. Sarah wasn't sure she could face the storm this time. Rumors soon began to swirl that she was considering something drastic, leaving the UK entirely. For someone who'd spent her entire adult life tied to the royal orbit, the idea sounded unthinkable, yet strangely believable. Because how long can someone keep fighting the same battle before they decide to walk away from it all? As her sister prepared to fly back home, one suggestion reportedly lingered in the air: a new beginning. A life far from the paparazzi, far from royal whispers, maybe even a life down under. But could the Duchess of York really vanish halfway across the world and start again? That's the question that sent tabloids into overdrive, and what came next would only make the story more shocking. When the whispers first began, most people brushed them off. Sarah Ferguson, the woman who spent decades surrounded by royal guards, castle walls, and centuries of tradition, couldn't possibly just pack her bags and disappear, could she? But then came the clue no one expected. Reports claimed her sister Jane had gently suggested that Sarah could start fresh in Australia, far from the endless UK tabloids, far from the palace corridors that now treated her like a ghost. And suddenly, it didn't sound so far-fetched. For Sarah, the idea of escape wasn't just about distance, it was about survival. Australia represented freedom, anonymity, and maybe even forgiveness. A place where she could live quietly, close to family, without the daily reminders of what she'd lost. Those who know her best say she's always loved the country, its energy, its warmth, and the people who still remember her fondly from her charity work and interviews there. Some Aussies still like her, one insider reportedly said, and she's always felt she could be herself there. It was a tempting thought. No more headlines, no more judgment, just open skies, ocean air, and a chance to finally breathe again. But this wasn't a fantasy, it was a plan. Behind the scenes, speculation grew that Sarah had begun quietly exploring her options, even discussing the move with close friends. Sources described her as exhausted and done with the UK. The idea of moving halfway across the world to join her sister in New South Wales was starting to sound like the only way out. But as every royal exile has learned before, freedom always comes with a price, and for Sarah Ferguson, that price could be the one thing she's not ready to lose, the last connection she still has to the royal life she once knew. Because while Australia might offer peace, it could also take away everything else. And what that truly means is where this story takes its darkest turn yet. At first, moving to Australia sounds like the perfect escape. Sun, family, and a life far away from the cold glare of the British press. But the truth, for Sarah Ferguson, it's not that simple. Because leaving the UK wouldn't just mean a change of address, it would mean cutting herself off from everything that still ties her to the royal world and to the life she spent decades trying to rebuild. Let's start with the obvious, Royal Lodge. The sprawling Windsor home she's shared with Prince Andrew for years isn't just a house, it's her last connection to the royal circle. It's where her daughters grew up. It's where she rebuilt her life after every scandal. Walking away from that means more than just losing a roof. It means losing her sense of belonging. And that's just the beginning. Her daughters, Princess Beatrice and Princess Eugenie, both live in the UK, raising young families of their own. They've stood by their mother through every controversy, but distance has a way of changing even the closest relationships. Moving to Australia would mean being halfway across the world from the two people who've given her the most strength. Then there's her reputation. Despite everything, Sarah has worked tirelessly to rebuild her image, writing books, doing interviews, and staying visible. In Australia, she'd vanish from that spotlight entirely. No more media platform, no more brand deals, no more Duchess of York identity, just Sarah, the woman trying to start over at 65. And as romantic as that sounds, it's also terrifying. For someone who's lived her entire life in front of cameras, being invisible might feel like freedom, or it might feel like being erased. Financially, too, the move could be risky. The royal lifestyle, even on the fringes, is expensive. The cost of relocation, the loss of certain UK-based ventures, and the lack of royal backing could make life abroad far more difficult than expected. So while the idea of a fresh start might sound peaceful, the reality is steep, emotionally, financially, and personally. Because starting over isn't just about where you go, it's about what you're willing to leave behind. And for Sarah Ferguson, that list is heartbreakingly long. But even with all those risks, one question still lingers. Would she really trade her royal past for the chance to disappear into a new life? Or is this just another chapter in a story she can't quite escape?
In the end, maybe this was never just about running away. Maybe for Sarah Ferguson, it's about finally stepping out of a life that's been defined and destroyed by the royal name attached to her. Because for nearly 4 decades, every move she made came with a headline, every mistake a scandal, every comeback a reminder of what she'd lost. And now, as she stands at this crossroads, with one foot in the royal world and the other reaching for something new, the question isn't whether she can leave, it's whether she should. If she stays, the scrutiny will never stop. The whispers, the judgment, the stories that refuse to die, they'll always follow her through every palace gate. But if she goes, she risks disappearing completely, trading her title, her home, and her legacy for a shot at peace in a country half a world away. Maybe that's why this story feels so haunting, because deep down, it's not just about Sarah Ferguson, it's about anyone who's ever wanted to escape the life that's trapped them, to start over, to breathe again, to be free. So, What do you think? Is Sarah Ferguson finally ready to break free, or is she still a prisoner of the life she built? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And if you want more stories that pull back the curtain on royal life and the secrets they try to keep hidden, make sure you're subscribed, because this might be the end of Sarah's chapter. But inside the palace walls, the next scandal is already being written.